Now on NLL Lacrosse Talk, allow me to introduce my guest this week, Hall of Famer Randy Mearns. Randy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Gary, thanks for having me. Yeah, excited to talk a lot about lacrosse. Obviously, with the NLL training camps going on, it's going to be another whirlwind year. Just as this great league, this great game continues to grow.
Absolutely. Now, the first question we ask all of our guests is, how did you get involved in lacrosse? What made you pick up a stick?
Oh, God. Well, I have an older brother who's 7 years older, and he started playing. He was a goaltender in St. Catharines. And, so you're hanging out around the arenas. It's got to be like 1973, 74. And a little guy, his name was Breen Snur, whose brother was playing with my brother, kind of came up and he had a stick and he's like, hey, like you play lacrosse? And I was like, no, I don't really know what this game is. And so all of a sudden, my dad got me a stick and my brother was a goalie. So, I got to shoot on him. Not that I scored a lot back in the day. And it just kind of started to just transpire from there and, played in St. Catharines, in the, I guess it would be, Tyke for 4 years and then moved up to novice and Pee-wee and Bantam and just kind of like moved it along. So yeah, it seems like it's been a part of my life since I've been 4. So, I just feel fortunate and, to have the experience and, just to be involved with this great game.
Right. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about the St. Catharines program because we've had a number of guys on who played through there, the Tyson Bells, the Kilgores, and guys like that who came into that program, all talking glowingly about it. What made this program so great?
Well, yeah, it's actually I ran into my first coach. His name was Jerry Galloway, actually, at the services for my mom yesterday. And him and his wife, Eva, came to pay some respects, and which was great to see him. I hadn't seen him in basically 15 years, right. Live. And, he made lacrosse fun. Like, and again, you're 4 or 5 years old and sure, you're learning skills, but like he just made the game fun. He would challenge you. There'd always be races and just a variety of those things. So it kept you, making you want to continue to play and just learn the game and have fun with it. And in my recollection, being a younger player, we used to play out in it was called Port Dalhousie. It was an outdoor bowl. It was right next to a pool. The parents would come. They'd let you go play lacrosse. They'd be hanging out doing a tailgate. You'd go slide into the pool after you played. And you got to mess around as kids and just the environment around it. Right. And then, in St. Catharines, it was always kind of interesting because at that time we had 2 lacrosse organizations. We had the St. Catharines Golden Eagles, which was called back in the day, now the Athletics, and the St. Catharines Spartans. And so half our city was, one organization and then the other. And we'd always have to try to go compete against the Bramptons or the Peterboroughs or the Whitbys. And we would always, we'd always come up short for the most part. We didn't have enough players and they were just deeper, going through all, those, the Tykes and the novice Pee-wee Bantam, going through that time. And the amazing part while that was all happening is, I played against Richie and Darius Kilgore like every year, because they were in our zone. They played for Niagara and the Lake and, played against Trevor Bidell and Donald Gauthier and Tyson Lias, who's out in Victoria now. He was in Dunnville. And so from a St. Catharines standpoint, we always kind of felt, as we were all considered maybe more B centers and C centers, we felt if we could finally get ourselves together, and that basically happened with playing St. Catharines Junior B and then Junior A for the Athletics, and finally having the group of guys that you played against your entire life for the last 10 years and had respect for and knew that they were great players. But now all of a sudden we were finally together and Jim Brady and the coaching staff did a phenomenal job of putting it together. And then we started having some success and we finally, got to the point of winning that Minto Cup in 1990.
Some success. My God. I say we had not long ago, I had Rich and Darius on back to back.
Yeah.
We talked, I don't know, forever about that of, you take a look at the lines and the team that you had for 1990 for the magical season. And you guys were beating teams 20-6, 22-3. It was incredible the amount of firepower. If you take a look at that team, I'm pretty sure that not almost everybody is in the Hall of Fame now. But the first,
there's a good number of them, that's for sure. And the ones that maybe aren't, maybe should be considered, not only in St. Catharines or the Ontario, but maybe even the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame. We just had a great group of guys, but and again, it just kind of like in my reflection, it just goes back that, I had to play Richie and Darius Kilgore like 5-6 times a year in our zone. And they were phenomenal. And it was kind of like this battle back and forth, and, with Tyson. And so you just knew the players that you were playing against, and everybody was competitive. Like everybody wanted to win,
sure.
And so when we finally had that opportunity, the 88, 89, and then 90, we finally got there. And then obviously, I had graduated, and Darius and Mikey Rombo and Mikey Lyons ended up winning another one, Stevie Fennell, in 1991. Just an amazing group of young men. I mean, we had obviously Jim Brady, was our coach, and he was a guy that held us accountable, and kind of pushed us and challenged us to always continue to be better.
Right.
And when you look at just like the talent level, guys, and again, a different time and a different game. I mean, it was up, back, and off back in the day. It wasn't like so specialized as it is now, in terms of you got your front door guys and your back door guys, and we could just run the floor, But I felt like, that year that we had won the Minto Cup, it was like we were all like looking for some respect within the lacrosse community, because when we got to go play the big powers, we would always lose by 5 or 6 goals because we just didn't have enough talent or enough guys. And that's what really made it special. And we just became such this tight knit bond of players, that were all, striving for the same goal. It didn't matter what your role was. Like, you just played your hearts out for your teammates. And then we were fortunate enough to beat Richmond in a 2 out of 3, out in British Columbia. And that's an experience and a memory that we're never, ever going to forget.
Right. And that's major, because that was the first Minto that St. Catharines won since 1950.
Long time.
Huge.
And then we got back to, then we had fun that night, and then we flew back. And then a lot of the, obviously our parents that couldn't make the travel, put together a big celebration when we got back, which was great. And then in St. Catharines, we have a big festival called the Grape and Wine Festival. And the parents put together a big float off of a transport truck. And, we got to go through the parade, and, I wouldn't lie, we had a lot of celebratories on that truck. And just like those.
Right. Now, you mentioned playing roles. With a team with that much talent, everybody has to play a role. They can't everybody just be the star and this, that, and the other. So it come down to coaching. What part of the coaching did you style your coaching after? Was it a lot to do with this team, or was it other people along the way?
Well, I think it was with a lot of other people along the way. I mean, first, when we, kind of growing up in that Tyken novice, it was working on your skills, but like you just had fun, and you got to go to tournaments, and, you're playing the games in the tournaments, and maybe you win and maybe you lose, but it was about going to the campsite afterwards with your buddies and messing around and having fun, and, trying to, do stupid stuff while you're being a kid, and hopefully not getting into trouble or getting caught.
Right.
And then, you kind of get into that at that time, the Pee-wee Bantam age, that 11, 12, 13, 14, where, you really kind of start developing your skills. But at that time in our zone, the teams that I played on only had like 12 guys. Right. For Darius and Richie in Niagara Lake, they maybe had like 10 kids. And so, Tyson Elias and Dunville, they had 11 kids, right? And because lacrosse was just growing. So you had to play everything. Like, you had to play offense, you had to play defense, you had to be a man down guy or a short man guy. You got to play on the power play. back in the day, you could rag the ball and run around for 2 minutes and, and kill penalties. And so you just got so used to and so experienced at playing, all facets of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I, when I reflect back at it back in that day, I mean, I used to run on a line with Rich and Darius, and maybe we had Jeff Snyder was a lefty, Jeffy Bridgman, Joey Fagiani, but we also had Darren Much and some of our heavies that were defensive guys, because those guys maybe not as gifted in terms of in terms of maybe the stick skills of scoring goals, but they could set hard picks. Right. And, if the defenses that you were playing against got a little rough and maybe want to take some liberties, you always had a couple of heavies in your offensive zone. So that kind of gave you a little bit more wiggle room and a little bit more room, And so as we got into that junior age where, I had the opportunity to play for 5 years, year 1, year 2, we were kind of like an 8-8 team. And we would lose to the Bramptons and to the Whitbys and the Peterboroughs and, win some games along the way. And then we continued to develop. And then all of a sudden, Richie joined. And then Darius came in and he was playing junior B, and Mikey Lyons and then Stevie Fennell. Now he's of age. He's coming in. Then, right. And Tyson's been there. And you just kind of start to see this group of young guys, under a coach that was very accountable. But he just pressed us. Like, if we weren't passing the ball fast, like he would just start screaming at us, like faster, like you're not going to win just doing that. If we were doing the sprinting drills, like we just did everything hard. And for me, I really built a really incredible bond with Darius Kilgore. Those last couple of years when I was playing junior, it was like we led every drill, like go, like we're going to go as fast as we can. Put the ball on a line as fast as we can, because we just knew by doing that, you're just going to get more and more experience, more and confident. And then when you get into a game and then you realize you get, end of the second period and getting into the third, that the guys you're playing against are tired. Well, then, that you have an advantage, right? And then that's where all of a sudden you can kind of like take a close game and all of a sudden be up by 7 goals. And now the game's kind of over. Right. But I guess when I kind of go back to the roles, it was whatever role needed to be facilitated. You were just on our team, like you were just a team guy. Like there was no ego. Like we just wanted to win, because coming out of St. Catharines, we never won anything. For 15 years, it was like this big thing for 15 years building. For St. Catharines, for Niagara-on-the-Lake, for Dunnville. Where all of a sudden it was like we had all our best players finally together, and we just knew that we could do something pretty amazing.
Right. The word that kept coming up when I was talking with the Kilgores about you was crafty. Just your skills, the way you thought, the way you put the lacrosse IQ to the way you put the game together was crafty. What do you think of that?
Yeah. I guess I mean, I wasn't the biggest guy, so, I had to try to figure out maybe a little bit of a different way. I think that's probably a good, a good adjective, I would really put a lot of time in understanding our opponents. And, obviously you had the pick and roll game and the slips and everything else, but how could you gain an advantage against a defender? And if they turn their head slightly, like if you just move a half a step, then you'll have a little bit of an advantage. But, you're playing with guys that are so phenomenal and that can put balls on a line in terms of their passing and catching skills. And that was kind of the press of what we wanted to do, but then also our coaches saying, like, just continue to do it as fast as you can. Because, then you get into a game, like I would just like look at Darius and we just knew what we were going to go do. Like we just kind of like could already read the play. And when we were playing offense, we had 5 guys relatively kind of seeing it the same way. And so for me, being a little bit smaller and not having the height or maybe the weight, my objective was always trying to make guys miss. I wasn't a big bulldozer. I'm not going to get into you and utilize, I guess, the teammates around us. But by no means was I always an initiator with the ball. Like I'll go work off ball. I'll go try to spring somebody else, free. And and I think probably the other thing that I really tried to do every time that I was on a lacrosse floor is just just play with your heart. Like go get the loose ball, be the first one in the corner.
Mhm.
You're taking a little bit of a risk, because back in the day somebody can just drive you through the boards, but but you got to get the ball. You got to get the ball, and when you got a group of guys that everybody's willing to put their wrists on the line or their neck on a line, especially around the boards, you got something special. But that made us team tough, because if somebody took some liberties, like it was our whole team, like that's going to be bad for you. And we had a lot of guys that could throw them back in the day too, right? So
Right.
it's just an amazing time, an amazing experience. I mean, I probably got, if you can attribute a lot of, the offensive success, yeah, I was a lefty lefty shooter on the power play, and Rich would pass it to Darius, pass it back to Rich. He'd throw it to me. I'd throw it to Rich, and then he'd just score because he could just he could just pick corners.
Mhm.
I didn't really do anything, but I got a point. So but boy, like we just had a will that we just wanted to win.
Yeah.
And again, for everybody, as we were playing minor, this was like 15 years, in the building until we finally won in 1990.
Mhm. Right. Now, you came up playing box primarily, correct?
Correct. Yep.
And then you go off into Canisius and you're playing field, and you have success in field. Not only success, all-time leading scorer at Canisius. I believe it was 190 career points in 39 games. That's a pretty good transition. How did you
Yeah.
like going into the field game?
It was kind of interesting. It's a great question. This is we're playing midget lacrosse. I'm with Mike Lyons, myself, who else? Brent White, and I think Derek Snur. And we're at Mike Lyons' dad's place out on Lake Street, and there's a high school just down the way. And we're 15, 16 years old, and we're like, hey, like there's a bunch of lacrosse going out on the field over there. And so we go ride our bikes over, and we're like, hey, well, what's going on? So the guy that was coaching it was a guy named Jamie Ward. And there was Marty Calder and Mikey Meridian and a bunch of other guys that were a little bit older. And we're like, hey, like, what is this? It's like, oh, there's like this field lacrosse league that happens in the fall time. And we're like, well, like, can we play? Like, is there like a tryout? And they're like, hey, like, we need guys. Sure, come on, like, come and play. So that was my first introduction into field lacrosse. But it was box lacrosse, right?
Right.
On a field. Nobody was two-handed. Everybody was still the pick and roll and, throwing behind the backs and, all that fun stuff. And then as that kind of evolved, that was probably 85, 86. And then in 88 was the first U19 World Championships that were going to be held in Australia. And there was the tryout process in 1987. So you kind of went through that. I was kind of coming into my own from a junior standpoint. I was the right age. So like to be 19, I was turning 19,
Right.
in 88. So that was good. And fortunate enough to make that roster to go to Australia. And again, we amazing guys like Bobby Keast and Robbie Crow and Patty Coyles, Scotty Rogers. Like I could just kind of name the list. Jeff McComb, and just a great group of guys. And then from there, myself and Jeff McComb, we had gone to the University of Western Ontario, but since we played for Team Canada, we had some experience. And then at that time, the Gators were already at Syracuse. Tommy Marichek was going to be going the next year. And then, myself and Jeff had the opportunity to go to Canisius and kind of go experience this field lacrosse thing.
Mhm.
To kind of cut it short, though, is Coach Van Tyne, who was our coach, who's a mentor to me, and God rest his soul. He would make me try to play right-handed all the time, become ambidextrous. And
Right.
I would try, right? You try, Gary, but like you're never going to do it in a game because you're just not confident in it. And everything was alley dodges and switching hands and all this stuff. And as the field game has continued to evolve and evolve and evolve to where it is now, and you watch high-level Division I, Division II, Division III lacrosse, it's the exact game that I started playing in 1985 because it's box lacrosse on a field.
Right. That's
because
a
it's all
typical,
split picks and pick and rolls now.
yeah,
Back in the day,
that's
you
the
were never
typical
allowed to pick the
Canadian.
ball. Oh my God,
Yeah, that's the typical Canadian way, and that's how we got into field.
right.
And as soon as we got away from it, weren't as successful, but they didn't know how to defend us.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's interesting to kind of see the game, at least in my experience, where being Canadian, our field lacrosse was box across on a field, having the opportunity to then go to the States in the early, in the early 90s. And as it kind of went, it was like 13 pops and alley dodges and taking like wide angle shots off, right-handed shooting like across your body. And then as the game continued to evolve, you got obviously the Gates and God, like Matty Shearer, Gavin Prout, Johnny Grant Jr. Then all of a sudden the pick and roll game started to come in, like where coaches were like, no, it's okay to go pick the ball, because that was like sacrilegious. No, never do that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you watch the game now, it's like playing box lacrosse on a field. And when I look back again, like it's the game that I played back in 1985. We just didn't know it was going to evolve to that.
Right.
Because it's all the pick and roll game now. So it's pretty awesome.
Now the 90s roll around, and boy, oh boy, what an exciting time for you. We can start with MSL, and you started with Brampton with a couple of man cups with them, went over to Six Nations and won 3 more with them, so 5 in a row. That's impressive. Most are lucky to get 1, if that.
Yeah, it's maybe right time, right place. We had an incredible team.
Great team.
Yeah, like Les Wakeling and Peter Gross, who was our GM, and Les was our coach. Were able to assemble a lot of guys that we had some good leadership, some older guys, but a lot of players that were just kind of coming into their prime into the MSL. The decisions that you kind of make in life, you never ever know where your journey is going to take you. After junior, I had the opportunity to potentially maybe go out west and, play for Vancouver or play for Burnaby and, kind of go do the West Coast experience.
Mm-hmm.
And as I kind of went through, do I do that? Do I not? And, had some conversations with Brampton, and I was kind of a little bit more of a homebody. I'm like, you know what? I'll just stick around, stay in Brampton. So, which was great because I got to go play, but then I could come back and watch Darius and Stevie Fennell and Lyonsy and all those guys because they were still playing. They were their 5th years in junior at St. Catharines. And that first year, I think we went maybe 8-8, made the playoffs, lost to Brooklyn, and then then Darius Kilgore shows up and Richie Kilgore shows up. But now we got Johnny Tavares and we got Jimmy Veltman and you got Billy Gary Annette, and you got Tommy Fair and Dean Giacone and Neil Dodrich and and Brian Shanahan, and it just all of a sudden you just get this group of guys that always showed up to practice. We would practice twice a week in Brampton, so we would travel up to practice. You're traveling 2.5 hours just to go to practice, and and we would practice hard, and just to continue to improve our athleticism, build team chemistry. And I remember winning that first man cup in Brampton. The floor was all sweaty. It was game 6 against New West. They had put all the rosin on the floor, and Troy Cordingley ends up scoring in overtime and then makes the team chase him all the way around the box, because why wouldn't he do that? Just amazing players, and Les, I know he's still not in the Canadian Lax Hall of Fame. I know that we kind of put him up, from a nomination process, but he was the guy that, was the architect. Right. He had to manage egos because like we were just stacked not only with talent, but with guys that wanted to win and knew how to play with each other, and right. knew how to in building that chemistry and really kind of doing and finding the role within the team, but also doing, how would I put this? Taking advantage of just opportunities. I'll give you an example, right? So we got Johnny Tavares and Troy Cordingley, righty lefty. And hey, offensively, they were stalwarts. We started getting more at that time. That was kind of, early 90s. Okay, now it's more offense, defense, and you got your transition guys. And at times you get caught on D and you play. but Troy and Johnny would get 2-on-1s all the time, right? Pass it back and forth. And I mean, some of the best goal scorers that ever played the game. But if they didn't score, it's typically going back the other way, right? So they would kind of take their chances a little bit, maybe not sprint as fast going back, because you got Patty Coyle, Billy Gary in net, or Tippy. You got Jimmy Veltman, you got Patty Coyle, and odds are we're just going to get the ball back and they can go back on another 2-on-1, and so teams were just frightened of us, obviously, just from an offensive standpoint. And then we were just relentless on defense. I mean, we had guys that could rule the roost from a physical standpoint. If guys were taking liberties on Tavares accordingly, like that wasn't going to stand. And good old, back in the 90s, guys are still using wooden sticks back in the day. So not too many guys want to go near Paul Hall or Patty Coyle or Mike Coyle or Shanny, with wood sticks. And we just played team tough and kept guys to the outside. And it was just a hard defense to break. And then we just had all this transition and all this offensive talent. And that kind of rolled for 2 years in Brampton. And then when we won out in Coquitlam, I remember standing on a table because we were celebrating, and it was kind of one of these things where it's like, man, like if we could keep this group together, for the next 4 or 5 years, like we can just kind of roll. Because like we were all, 24, 25 kind of coming into our prime. But, as things kind of happened, some of us got traded to Six Nations, and, things kind of evolved, and there was a good portion of us that ended up in Six Nations that next year.
Right. And you put together 3 of them over there.
Well, now all of a sudden you're playing with Timmy Bomberry, Dewey Jacobs, Cam Bomberry, Peter Sky, Miles General.
Wow.
Just another eclectic, incredible team. You got Darius and Richie were always the stalwarts. I mean, Tavares, accordingly came in a little bit late. Billy, and these group of guys, we just knew how to play, together. We just had a chemistry. We knew what we were all good at. We were all willing to buy and roll, but we were also willing to, share the ball. And if Johnny Rose is on a 2-on-1 was more of a defensive transition guy, well, let's get him a goal. He's going to play the tough defense. You got to reward those guys if all of a sudden they get in some transition kind of thing. And Les Wakeling always held us accountable. And he managed egos, gave everybody a voice, but also everybody knew that they had a role. You had your primary, say 14, 15 guys. And then you got the other 8, 9 guys of the active roster that guys are going to be in and out of the lineup. I feel like he was always honest with guys and where they kind of fit. But he would, at least this is my memory, is we would come in at, in between periods, and then himself and we had Dave General. This is in Six Nations. And Dave was a very calm, hey, the goalie's doing this, very, very analytical. Hey, we got to run a little bit more pick and roll down low. Let's do a little bit more down pick, very strategic. Les would just come in and say, nobody wants to play friggin' defense. Nobody wants to play defense. Why don't you guys want to play defense? And we could be winning a game by 8 goals.
Right.
But he just you just, nobody wants to run back. It's garbage. And so it was always just then a reminder of keep your feet on the ground. You're talented and we all know, but defense is going to win championships, and sooner or later, if nobody wants to run back and play defense, that's going to cost us. And he pleasantly reminded us at every intermission that, it doesn't matter if you're up by 10, you need to go play defense.
Right. All right. So we go into the MILL, and you get drafted by Buffalo in 92, played a year with them in 93, win a championship there. And then off to Rochester. Let's talk about the mill in itself and then your career with these guys.
Yeah. I got drafted. Johnny Meridian, drafted me in the Buffalo. He actually kind of, he reached out. He said, because I still had a year of eligibility to go back to Canisius. And he's like, well, do you want us to draft you or not? And I'm like, And again, the year before, because I was in Buffalo at Canisius, with Darius and Richie and, Derek Keenan and Stewie Aird and, Billy Gary and, Cowier of the Nets and, Tavares and Cordingly. And so since I was playing with those guys in the summertime, I felt very confident that I could play in the MILL. And so I got to go watch these games. And I mean, all of a sudden the first game gets held up for for about an hour because, they get, 16,000 people in the old odd.
Uh-huh.
And it's phenomenal lacrosse. It's back and forth. There's fights. There's not saying fighting's great, but, everybody's on the edge of their seat, like, hey, like it's a little bit violent. And it wasn't, at that time, I felt like in Buffalo, it wasn't really like, hey, this is a family thing. This is come get entertained. It's physical. It's violent. The stick work is incredible, but you might not really understand the game because lacrosse really wasn't big in Buffalo at the time. And but you're going to love it. And then you can go out afterwards till 4:00 in the morning. Have a blast. And so it just started just generating, all this interest. And so in 1993, I had the fortunate opportunity to, get drafted and cut the roster.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time it was only an 8-game schedule.
Yeah.
And we joke about it now. I had the opportunity to go start my master's potentially back at Canisius if I would have wanted to take my, additional year eligibility wise. But I'm like, oh, no. There's 16,000 people. I mean, we're playing in Canada, you're playing in front of 500, 1,000 people. Like it's 16,000. Why wouldn't you want to experience that? And so no, go, let's do it. And played on an incredible team. I was kind of a role guy, transition guy, and you had to earn your keep. But you only played 8 games. And then what you kind of realize is, geez, like, okay, I got paid $125, right? You pay Uncle Sam, you got $95 left. You went and spent it at Crawdaddy's or Le Club, and you you came home with nothing. But you had an incredible experience, and you were playing in front of 16,000 people.
And that was a zoo. It was a zoo. I used to go to the Odd all the time for Bandits games, and that place was just sitting in the orange, and you felt if you lean forward, you're going to be on the floor.
Yeah, because you're going to fall over. Like, not good, right? Not good. And so that kind of happened. And then I dislocated my shoulder, so I didn't play for a year. So then I wasn't the property of Buffalo anymore. And then I got picked up by Rochester. And then it was right around that time, though, that, and probably more the Canadian guys than the American guys at that time. Because for Canada, for the Canadian guys or the Native American guys, it was like, no, like we're playing in front of crowds. This is awesome. Like, this is our game. It's not field lacrosse. This is box lacrosse. Where I kind of felt for the American guys that were playing in the loop, it's like, I work on Wall Street. I get to go do this during the weekend. It's not really about the money, And then all of a sudden you start looking, in the stands, and you're kind of like, okay, like there's 16,000 people here paying $20 a ticket. That's 320,000. Our entire roster salary and our opponent's salary and maybe the coaches was like 10 grand.
Right.
Like somebody's making some money off of this.
Yeah.
And obviously Russ Klein and Chris Fritz, they were the guys, they brought it forward, and hey, being capitalists, not an issue. But then that's when all of a sudden the PLPA kind of started to get formed to try to upgrade the salaries and, build the contract. And, that was probably 94, 95, 96-ish. And then for myself, having the opportunity to go to Rochester, what was an incredible experience, because I felt like in Rochester for those 8-9 years that I was there, it was we had Canadian guys, we had Native American guys, Cam, Dewey Jacobs, just a variety of those guys. And then we had American guys, Timmy Sudan, Tommy Emick, Reggie Thorpe. So we were kind of like the triad. We had a lot of people. We weren't just all Canadian or all American. We were just like this group. And we got close in 95, 96, not so much. But in 97, it just felt like, okay, like we just have the roster. We had a good face-off guy in Brian Silcott. I mean, Paulie Gate. I mean, playing with him, like, when he wants to get to the net, he's just getting to the net. We got Chris Driscoll, God, Mark Vieta, again, the list is Chugger was in net, Steve Dietrich. And that was a big memorable, I guess, championship, because in that 97, that's when we played Buffalo. But that was now back at the Marine Midland, because the odd was gone. And I think it was like 18,590. And just that was just an incredible experience.
Right. Now, if you're ever interested in watching some of these games, I inherited Bill Fox's collection of VHS tapes.
Oh, nicely done. Yes.
And I have been spending the last couple of years, converting a couple of tapes every month. I've got about 40 or 50 games up on Lacrosse All the Time YouTube page. You can watch many of the Mill games and some of the NLL games. I believe it's from 87 to about 2010. These games.
I got to tell you, again, for anybody that's watching, and it's something that they should go back and watch. One, it's a lot of the guys that are the GMs and the head coaches of all these teams in the NLL, relatively speaking. That's who you get to go watch, because it's back in the day. It's also a little bit of it's a different game than it is now. It's so specialized. Now, I will say this, the game today of what the players do to stay in the league, the older guys, the training regimen that they go through, the nutritionists, the weight training, because they don't want to leave, because this game is going to continue to grow. And then now all of a sudden you got the young bucks, and more Canadians, First Indigenous, First Nation guys are going down in the States playing field lacrosse. Get your education. You get 4 years to put on 25 pounds of muscle. You get to play junior A, get into the MSL or the WLA. You get drafted, and then you're just trying to cut a roster. And it's hard to do. And the money's kind of getting there. Like, it's not, nobody's making millions, but it's a lot better than it was 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And but going back and watching what it was to like now where it is, having the opportunity to do a lot of the color with Johnny Gertler in Buffalo. For myself, you get to go down in behind the scenes, and I wouldn't survive in today's league. Yeah. I mean, everybody's 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". They're just monsters. It's crazy.
It's funny because most people go the other way. Is, even the Kilgores talk about it being the Wild West in Mill. Things that would be maybe a 5-game suspension nowadays. Yeah, maybe a change of possession back then. Sorry, did you catch me on that one, Randy?
Oh, Gary, sorry, you cut out, but I think the way you were talking about is, I feel back in the 90s, and if you watch those games, sorry.
No, so things that would be maybe a 5-game suspension nowadays would be maybe a change of possession back then.
Oh no, absolutely. It was a lot more physical. They let you play a lot more. It was, and as this has kind of evolved, where, you look at a lot of the sports where, fighting has kind of now been taken out of the game. Not that you still can't do it, but the penalties, it just policed itself. Every team always had 3 or 4 heavies. Typically the heavies would fight the heavies. It wasn't like a heavy would fight a smaller guy. But just physical, and to your point, a lot of things that would be a 5-game suspension, would just be a 2-minute minor, or just change the possession.
Yeah.
Right. But I feel this, Gary, though, like when you look at the just the players that are playing in the current NLL, it is what they do, to stay at the highest level, and to continue to participate in the NLL as we're trying to continue to grow the game, the NLL. It's amazing what they do. And the younger generation now that have all this experience, maybe going to the NCAA, maybe even playing Kufla, right? They get these 4 years to get a little bit bigger, a little bit faster. But when they come in, everybody has a lift schedule. Everybody has a nutritionist. Guys are in the cryo chambers. Guys are actually getting stretched and, you go to a massage therapist 4 times a week. We're back in the day, you played a game and you maybe ran a little bit, you practice on a Tuesday, and then you back with your guys, on that Friday night for a shoot around. It's the athleticism of the game is just like at a different level. Like it really is at a different level. As much as there were incredible players, back in the day, and guys that hold a lot of the records, right? The Gators and Johnny Tavares and the whole bit. The athleticism is just, it's off the charts.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you alluded to you being in the booth with John Gertler. Many a game that I really enjoy watching you or listening to you and John banter about in those games. What was it like working with John? I've known John for a mess of years as well, and just a great guy.
Yeah, great guy. Incredible. Great play-by-play guy. Worked with him. God, I don't know, maybe 20 years, 22 years, and had the opportunity. Like once I retired, became a full-time head coach at Canisius, I got to actually just kind of roll into, being a color guy,
Right.
which kind of suited me. Gertz and I kind of laugh now that we're 20 years in. We were typically more radio, and then we had the ESPN Plus platform, where we'd have the intermissions, but we kind of maybe had more faces for radio than maybe the TV, right? So, but absolutely professional, and I learned so much from him in terms of how to broadcast, what preparation that you need to kind of do. And then over the years, we were just able to really develop, a dynamic of when I'm going to come in, when he needs to finish the play and finish the call. And we just built this chemistry where we'd be excited, to see each other and and talking about the game during the week and what are the goods and what are the bads, what's the pros, what's this team need to do to beat the Bandits and vice versa. And then we get up in a booth. And now that's the fun stuff, and you get to call the game, and he's so good. But if I wanted to maybe get something in, like, hey, like I got something from the last play, I'd give him a little shrug on the arm, like, hey, I got something. And then he would roll through it. And then, in about 5 seconds, he would end, and then I could just kind of come in. But, if somebody was getting chopped or if there was like a penalty, like I'd be hitting Gertler in the press box. Like, I'm just, because, I'm active. Like I'm a ball of energy. I mean, he was the real magician. I just got to describe plays with a lot of energy, and
Right.
at least that's what I tried to do. And other guys have said, hey, well, like, how did you do it? I just kind of looked at it, I had the opportunity and the experience of playing the game. I'm just like, if you're ever getting it broad, like you need to be yourself. If you're trying to be something that you're not, it just doesn't really flow. And either people like it or they don't. And for me, I just try to call it like I saw it.
What was always the hook with me was that you were always very descriptive. If the shot was low to high, you would tell me it was low to high into the top cheese, whatever. And you would always, put that color into it, but also with your own experience. So if anybody else was watching, they would get the idea of what just happened.
Right. I thought that this was, I feel like this one was kind of funny. So this didn't happen every game, but I would say to my team, my guys, like when I was at Canisius, at Bonaventure, just friends, because while you're in the box, you're looking at monitors and let me step back. The amount of time and engineers and producers now producing games in the NLL to 20 years ago, again, that is off the charts.
Right.
The information that you get in your headset is just off the charts. But to kind of make it entertaining, I would say to friends or my guys, I'm like, here, while the game's going on, if you're listening, like just text me something. I don't know, just text me a saying, like it could be anything. And then if I get the opportunity, because I get the phone and I'll try to get it in, because I'll try to, describe what you want me to say somehow in this game, and then you'll know that I'm actually really talking to you. But I'll try to make it like kind of funny. So I get, for an example, somebody had texted me like, hey, you use Apple Crisp Crunch. And I'm like, okay, well, how are you going to do that? And so Josh Byrne was having a great game. It's like going into the third quarter. I think he scores his 5th goal. And, Gertler finishes up his thing and no air burn and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, Johnny, that's so sweet. That was as sweet as my grandmother's apple crisp crunch, right?
It's awesome.
So, but it took me like 5 minutes to think how I would use it. And so, I don't know. And so maybe it was interactive as well. It was really, really fun to do the color for sure.
Right. Now, we just had the Worlds, both men's and women's for the first time. Last week, I had 5 of the top women on the show, and it was just fantastic to talk about, the growing and everything else that's gone on, and the problems with equipment and all the other little things that nobody really would have thought about that are, major, that need to get addressed. Yep. What's your take on it? Women, I think, stole the show in the Worlds. That gold medal game was something for the ages.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, incredible lacrosse. Absolutely incredible lacrosse. The gold medal game. God, and again, a testament, to just the growth of girls and women's box lacrosse, right, in Canada. And then that all translates into a lot more Canadians, and a lot more Canadian women and girls are getting all recruited to go down to the States, and kind of the same kind of metric. And for us, it's always, that main competition is obviously Team USA. So you get the opportunity to go compete, and you get to know who's who, and but just the skill level, the stick work, the understanding, the pick and roll game, and just the physicality of it too. It was absolutely incredible. And I feel like the refs let them play too, for the most part. Right. You don't want to over officiate, because they know how to play lacrosse. And again, lacrosse is a little bit of a violent sport. That's one of the reasons why you play, because you like to, that physical kind of contact, and then when you look at, obviously Dana Dobie and, Erica Evans, and just the skill level that they have, that's incredible. And then I can kind of encapsulate that when you're watching high level Division I women's lacrosse, and even D2, D3. I mean, I feel sometimes they have better sticks than guys, because it's on a line to a stick, and relatively they're all ambidextrous, and obviously in the box game, sure, you're going to play with more than one hand, but just the athleticism and how they kind of continue to evolve the rules, at least in the NCAA, where there's not as much stoppage in play. I think that was kind of a little bit of a down. If you're visually watching the game, there's all these stops, where now it's a lot more free flow. But boy, you watch them play, it's these girls can play, and that's only going to continue to grow the game internationally, not only from a field standpoint, but from a box standpoint. Just like on the men's side, when you look back, 1988 U19. I mean, there was only 4 countries. In 2006, I think there was only 12 countries, or maybe 14, that were in London. Right. Now there's 97 countries that are part of world lacrosse, from the man's, from a we're gonna have a national governing body, men and women, and how's that going to continue to grow as it kind of evolves into the Olympic push, right? And this great game, I just don't think is going to stop. And but watching that women's, the women's championship game in Utica, I was like, oh, yeah. I felt so bad. I thought Troy Cordingley, and his coaching staff did a tremendous job. You got to decide who is going to be on the roster and go through the journey. And, and just coming up a little bit short there in the fourth quarter, was obviously kind of a bummer, being Canadian, but something to watch for sure.
Definitely. Now, you brought up the Olympics. What are your thoughts on sixes?
You know what? I like the game. I think that it's the game that has to be the game to get into the Olympics. I mean, that was kind of like a no-brainer, as they were kind of figuring out, knowing all the parameters that World Lacrosse had to hit to get it into the Olympics. I think first and foremost there, Gary, is man, there's a lot of people that will never really get recognized, that for about 15, 20 years of their lives, when it was, the Federation of International Lacrosse, and then there was the woman component of that, that put a lot of effort to try to figure out how is this game going to get into the Olympics.
Right.
And then as it kind of built and Sport Accord, and now we're World Lacrosse and the Blue Ribbon Group to figure out the game. And then also being smart enough that some people need to now step away, because now we need to bring in professionals that know the people, have more of the connections to kind of move it forward. When it was announced that lacrosse was going to be back into, or be back into the Olympics finally, regardless of the Sixers game, we can get into that. I mean, got like people put a lifetime into it just to get it back there. And so, boom, check that box. And for me, a guy that put a lot of work into it, was one of my mentors growing up, is Stan Cockerton. You know, like he put a lot of work into World Lacrosse. Now, he wasn't officially a part of World Lacrosse anymore, but I know he put in 25 years of his life to get it there, you know, and just an amazing stuff. To the Sixers game, knowing that needed to be the game where, you know, you got to have a small roster. How you going to do it? You know, if you're going to be limited to 12 guys and a couple of coaches, because you only can have so many players. They don't want, you know, a field lacrosse team. It couldn't be box lacrosse, at least at this point, because sure, on the men's side, you know, hey, there's a lot of countries that play box lacrosse, but on the women's side, that's just developing. You know, it was kind of in this infancy. And so it had to be the game. Now, the game itself is fast. It's strategic. When they went through the Blue Ribbon Group, you know, there's, well, what should be the shot clock. They actually had a thought process of, although it's field lacrosse nets, should they make the nets smaller, right? Should they make the nets smaller?
That was my point.
As 6x6. And then when you think that through, you're like these guys like Brett Dobson or the American goalies, Dylan Ward, like guys are stepping down from 7 yards. If you made the goal smaller, like they're going to get pelted. I mean, goalies are already nuts anyway, right, Gary? But but they're going to get hurt. You know, and you know, they kind of adjust. I feel this. I feel, hey, one face off to start each quarter, 8 minutes. It's quick. It goes fast. But you know what? I feel like it'll add more parity.
Right.
And the reason being, the field lacrosse game is, when you got the field lacrosse game, you know what? Team Canada, Team USA. You know, we'll say with Team Canada, right? We got Jeff Snyder, we got Jake Withers, we got Justin Anacho, you got what's it? The young buck that's going to Ohio State, Oldman. He's kind of like one of these next guys. Yeah. So when we had the opportunity to play all these other countries, well, we're going to go 80% on the faceoff. So we always have the ball, right? And the same thing with the U.S. Well, you know, whoever qualifies for the Olympics, whether it's 6 countries or 8 countries, faceoffs aren't as they'll still be important, but they're not as going to be as
well, not to be all end all now to your offense.
Yeah, absolutely, right, absolutely. Because you know, I feel like Australia would be able to put together a team of 12 guys that are all 6'3", 6'4", that can run field.
Right.
And it's not about the faceoff. We get the ball back. You know, it's 50-50. You know, and now we'll see how that kind of, you know, evolves over the next, you know, 3.5 years as it kind of builds towards this Olympic push and whoever qualifies. But I think that's a big thing, because there's not just the dominance on the faceoffs.
Right.
And I think countries are going to be able to put the guys 12 guys, you know, and then now can they compete the cross strategy of the Canadian team? And then obviously Team USA is continuing to get better, you know, having a great showing in the World Box, you know, in Utica. And that's a testament to U.S. box lacrosse and Shaden Santos and Matt Brown, and over the last 15 years developing that whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because more and more Americans are playing and more Canadians are coaching down in the States and teaching the game. Maybe that's not good for Canada lacrosse down the road, but you know, it's going to help build it. You know, and so I feel at the end of the day in 2028, on how it ever pans out, is I feel that that, and then this is probably the most important thing that I'll say about it, is the biggest rated game of lacrosse, on ESPN was 2 years ago against Duke and Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
National championship.
Right.
It had 970,000 live followers on average through the 2.5 hour broadcast.
Right.
I don't know what that is, a +5 or whatever it is, but like that's the highest rated game. In 2028, there's going to be a championship game. It could be Canada and the US. It could be the Haudenosaunee in Japan. Who
Right.
really knows, right?
Yeah.
But the amount of people that watch the Olympics, because everybody watches the Olympics, those shoes, but not everybody's going to watch everything. But in one fell swoop in 2028, I feel like there will be at least 50 to 100 million people watching the game of lacrosse.
Right. Yeah, I know. I said the same thing. That is when it goes from here to here.
Bam.
Yeah.
Just
Absolutely.
like that. Just like that. And a lot of people been putting a lot of work. Everybody has their own brands, right? The NCAA, I'm trying to just take care of Bonaventure, right? You could be the head coach and, of the St. Catharines Athletics or the Peterborough Lakers. You could be a field lacrosse coach, Jason Rudge and Nipissing.
Mm-hmm.
But we're all connected to this game. And the more that we all continue to try to grow the game, to continue to push your own program forward, your own brand forward. Jeff Snyder, Elevate out in Alberta, does a tremendous job of producing lacrosse players and affording them the opportunity to try to get down to the States. Brody and the Hill Academy, whatever it is, I feel like we all do it, relatively speaking, for the love of the game. There's a capitalistic standpoint to the game now, though, but that's just kind of part of it.
Right.
There's no putting that genie back in the bottle. But everything that we do to build this game, to where it can all of a sudden be really kind of considered the fifth major sport.
Yeah.
Great. Still a ways away, but everybody's dreaming about it. But every year it gets a little bit closer and a little bit closer,
right.
And that's the exciting part, just being involved with this game, to kind of know where it was to where it's going to go. And sooner or later, I'm getting long in the tooth, and wherever I evolve, it's the next generation. Danny Coates is going to be like, Danny Coates is, if you haven't had him on yet, like he's really good. He's, coaching box cross in the States and the summer team captain of Rochester Nighthawks and Team Canada guy.
Right.
Like he's one of the next guys, that's going to carry the torch another 25 years and wherever that goes. So it's absolutely in good hands.
Right. Well, Randy, I want to thank you. This was like an hour that went by like this. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for all your knowledge. I want to thank you for all you've put into the game.
Well, hey, I appreciate it, Gary. I thank you, and hey, keep on doing this, because this is just another step forward. It's another platform, right? And it's another platform. And then I was kind of sitting here. I'm going to put on my glasses real quick, because I was like, I was looking at some of the group chats. And I see my good friend Chris Panos, old school's up on the stat. Good stories with him. But he's also, an American guy that played up in Canada and had a great career and coaching in the NCAA. And I think he's now at one of the prep schools down in the States. But a guy
is it Fort Union?
Yeah, a guy that continues to build the game. Right, we're just all part of it. And then and then sooner or later, I don't know who, but sooner or later, somebody's going to make $1 million a year playing lacrosse.